I mean, there's never ever, I don't think, been any consequences for supporting transgenderism and trans activism. So it's interesting. I mean, I find that a lot of what trans activists do is a total reversal and a total projection onto women in particular, but really anybody who is labeled a TERF. That term now, the TERF, of course, means trans exclusionary radical feminist, but it's applied to anybody, man or woman, non-feminist, whatever, who barely even speaks out against gender identity ideology or even just defends women-only spaces or defends women's sports. It can be so mild what you say. Just, what you said was so mild. And to be attacked on that level is so crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you always find out things later on and you're like, oh, right, I see. So, I mean, one of the people who ended up going after me very, very heavily used to be quite a good friend of mine before they started transitioning. My rejection of that person, I think, I mean, I tried to remain friends. We'd actually even met up to try and remain friends because I was like, look, I'm not, I don't agree with your ideology, but I don't wish you any harm and but, we're going to have a discussion about what our red lines are, basically, if we're going to remain friends. And I said, listen, and so he said to me, well, my red line is that you don't go after my rights. And I was like, well, I've got no intention of doing that. But I hadn't realized that he thought his rights were things that his rights weren't. So I said, okay, well, fair enough. Well, my red line is...
Don't worry, I'm not going to go after your right to vote. I promise.
Yeah, I was just like, well, I mean, I don't want you getting beaten up in the street. You've got a right to freedom from discrimination and whatever. So I'm not going to do that. It'll be daft. But I hadn't realised, as I say, that he completely misinterpreted the Equality Act. So, and I met up with him and I said, listen, my red line is you must never, ever demand that I say things that I know aren't true. So you must never demand that I say things like lesbians can have a penis and that some men can get pregnant. He turned puce and was just like, but some lesbians do have a penis and some men can get pregnant and you're just going to have to accept it. And I was like, okay, our friendship, I think, might be over. And then, although you wouldn't find him at the forefront of a lot of the things that have happened to me, I think that was late 2018. So I think stuff was happening behind the scenes and they were just waiting, I think, for a moment to go for me. Yeah. So, God, what even was what even was your question there? I just got off and one about this twat.
I mean, I was just talking about how... Yeah. Pardon, sorry.
The consequences. Yeah, there's no consequences for these people. Scotland is tiny. Everybody in the Scottish Arts knows who a lot of my hounders are. I've never directly named any of them myself, but a couple of them have been picked up by the press. So the consequences for a couple of them have been a couple of bad days in the press, because the Scottish press is actually really quite good these days. And is really against houndings, I think, because they've got a very strong sort of freedom of speech elements. So they're very against the houndings. But apart from that, there's, none of my hounders have lost any work. Quite the opposite.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Do you think that women get it worse in this particular, let's call it a debate, in terms of women who speak out against gender identity ideology? Do you think they get it worse than the men who speak out?
Yeah, I think on two levels. First of all, that we are harmed by the ideology itself, even if we don't say a word about it. So, even if we stay completely silent, or if women comply, they're still harmed by the ideology. But then you're harmed for speaking out about it, and then you're harmed the more you speak out about it. So it's like a 3 levels of harm. But the second thing is that it doesn't take very much for a woman to start getting hounded. So I said women shouldn't be throat punched at freaking pride marches or for having meetings, and I start getting the same pattern of hounding as other people who've said, other men who've said far more than that. So men shouldn't be getting hounded either. It's not something I want sex-based parity on, but you don't need to say very much as a woman to start getting it. Whereas men tend to have to say a lot more before it really matters. And I think men, not across the board, but I think a lot of men have managed to be uncancelled sooner than women manage it, is something I've noticed too. It's not their fault, but, you know, just an observation.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, God knows. I think a lot of the men who've, well, not all, but I think some of the men who've spoken out who are maybe involved in this kind of world, the podcasting world and that kind of thing, they're maybe very well connected in a way that a lot of us women weren't, and perhaps moneyed in a way that some of us weren't as well. So I think that's kind of part of it. And I think some of the men joined quite late too. I mean, obviously, Graham Linehan is the most cancelled man who's been involved in this fight, I think. But others, yeah, seem to have managed to get back on their feet quite quickly. And I think that partly that's because of that first thing I mentioned. This is an existential issue for women. You know, this is about our rights. This is about our definition and our language that we need in order to, you know, even assert our rights. So it's very visceral for us as well, which takes up a lot of headspace. I think there are different reasons for it.